Hello learners, today let us learn about Glaser's basic teaching model. Introduction. Educational psychology has always been concerned with the process of learning. But now there is a shift from learning to teaching because learning theories cannot solve the problems of teaching. This is because teaching is a man-making business and just sitting on an armchair with a cup of tea in hand to sip will not meet its demand. As teaching requires the teacher to have sound knowledge of the subject content, method, techniques, and teaching aids to be used by him or her. In addition, it also demands an art as well as skill for making the teaching episode interesting and effective one. Therefore, efforts are being made by educationists and psychologists to develop theories of teaching, as a result of which some teaching models have been developed. This development of model of teaching is the recent innovation in the field of teaching technology. A model of teaching is a pattern or plan which can be used to shape a curriculum or course, to select instructional material and to guide the teacher's action, by Joyce and Well, 1972. An important purpose of discussing models of teaching is to assess the critical pedagogy, to have a wide range of approaches for creating a proper interactive environment for learning. As the classic definition of teaching is the design and creation of environment, as students learn by interacting with those environments and they study how to learn. Dewey, 1916. Now let us learn about the basic teaching model. Robert Glaser in 1962 has developed the basic teaching model on the basis of psychological principles. He tried to explain the whole teaching process in an appropriate way by dividing it into 4 basic components, namely, number 1, instructional objectives, number 2, entering behavior, number 3, instructional procedures, number 4, performance assessment. The model is a stripped-down teaching model where the 4 components of the model represent the basic divisions with its connecting arrows that show only the major sequence of events in the instructional process. Therefore, it is known as basic teaching model. Each component will help to organize the great body of facts, concepts, and principles which makes up the model and will be useful in several ways, as box A, which denotes the instructional objectives. Instructional objectives are statements that describe the abilities students should be able to display to demonstrate that important concepts and principles have been incorporated into their own structure of knowledge. Robert L. Ebel and David A. Frisby. In simple words, instructional objectives are those the students should attain upon completion of a segment of instruction. For instruction to be effective and systematic, the instructional objectives are stated in behavioral terms. Example, after the lesson is over, the student will be able to, Number 1, name the developer of basic teaching model. Number 2, illustrate the basic teaching model. Number 3, suggest ideas for improvement of this model. Number 4, differentiate between the 4 components of the model. Number 5, relate the 4 components of the model. And number 6, they will be able to develop a better model. With the expectation to achieve these instructional objectives, the teacher will prepare for the day's lesson. Now let us come to box number B, which is about entering behavior of the student. Every learner has initial behavior before he enters teaching learning process. It is essential to detect the entering behavior of the learner before giving instructions. Therefore, entering behavior is where the instruction must always begin. It is just like previous knowledge of a subject or the performance of the learner in terms of educational abilities. It describes the student level before the instruction begins. It refers to what the student has previously learned, his intellectual ability and development, his motivational state, and certain social and cultural determinants of his learning ability. This step is important because only after this step, the competent teacher will determine the appropriate instructional objectives and instructional procedure to be adopted to take the students from entry behavior to terminal behavior. This way, the teaching can be described as getting the students from where he is to where we would like him to be, as moving from entering to terminal behavior. Together, description of entering and terminal behavior define the limits of instructional responsibility for each degree of teaching. Now, let us come to box C, which deals with instructional procedure. It is the most active part of the teaching process. It indicates the method, procedure, and strategies of teaching to be adopted by a teacher to take his learner from entry behavior to the instructional objective he determined. But we need to be cautious as the art of teaching is comparable to have a rubber band attached to the learner capability. If the learner needs more help, we pull the rubber band a bit to achieve our instructional objectives, but not so hard that it snaps. Finally, let us come to box D, which is related to performance assessment. Here, the performance of the learners need to be assessed at the entry level through placement evaluation to check whether the child possesses the sound knowledge and skills needed to begin the planned instruction. Then diagnostic evaluation to consider the defective side of the learner while determining the instructional objectives in addition to the entry behavior of the child. Formative evaluation to monitor continuously the instructional process executed by the teacher, whether the learner is able to attain the instruction as planned earlier. Then we have summative evaluation, where ultimate behavior of the learner is tested at the end of the teaching learning process to determine whether the planned instructional objectives are achieved or not, and to assign grades to learner according to their performance. If the need arises, objectives may be modified. The instructional procedure may be improved and assessment of performance is made again. It is possible to add many more connecting lines that connect components later in the sequence with the earlier ones are called feedback loops. The 4 feedback loops, as shown in the diagram, connect performance assessment with each of the earlier components of the model. All four basic components are interrelated with one another. They interact and influence each other. If the performance assessment indicates that the learners have not been able to achieve the objectives set for them, necessary changes are brought about in any one of all preceding components of this model so that the goals of instruction are attained. Now let us come to the descriptions of Glaser's basic teaching model. Glaser's model may be described in terms of 5 fundamental elements as under. Number 1, focus. Number 2, syntax. Social system. Principles of reaction. Support system. Focus. This model attempts to pinpoint the process and measure activities comprising the entire teaching learning process. It also brings into the light sequence to be followed in the instructional process. Then we have number 2, syntax. In this model, flow of activities is sequentially listed. A. First, the objective to be followed are fixed in accordance with Bloom's taxonomy. B. Then the entering behavior showing the understanding and background of the student will be determined. C. Thereafter, the instructional work is carried out to achieve the objectives, keeping in view the entering behavior of the learner. D. The ultimate behavior of the learner is determined by using a different type of test. Then we have social system. The model describes a teacher-dominated classroom climate. Here, students are receptive and appreciative of the teaching activity. The success of this model depends upon the competency and ability of the teacher in terms of various skills like the formulation of objectives, use of proper strategies, techniques of evaluation, etc. Principles of reaction. A. Principles of interdependence. B. Principles of active involvement. C. Principles of follow-up. Then we have principles of reaction. Main principles of reaction are A. Principles of interdependence. The students' response are to be understood and dealt with in the light of interaction and interdependence, process and assessment. B. Principles of active involvement. Proper execution of this model requires a lot of activity on the part of the teacher. The model requires the active involvement of the teacher from the beginning to the end. Understanding of the potential and deficiencies of the students is required at every stage of the teacher in order to achieve the objective. C. Principles of follow-up. An assessment is made after teaching. In case the results are not accordance with set objectives, gaps, and deficiencies are found out by the teacher, then he tries to rectify the drawbacks by taking corrective measures. Then we have the last 5 fundamental elements, that is support system. The teacher needs following support system for its success. A. Proper environment. Proper teaching learning environment and situations are required for the use of suitable teaching strategies. Pre-service and in-service facilities. Availability of adequate pre-service and in-service activities to the teacher to acquire needed skills for using this model. C. Availability of appropriate evaluation device for the assessment of entering and terminal behavior of the students. Now we come to the application of the Glaser's basic teaching model. Since the model is quite systematic and structured, It is applicable to all levels of education, that is elementary, secondary and higher secondary, etc. It is applied to subject matter related to any subject, as a teacher can use this model for teaching them. It implies a personal contact between the teacher and the student. It also implies a greater emphasis on the competency of the teacher rather than on his personality. Teaching for any length of time, maybe 40 minutes, 1 hour, 1 week, etc., is possible by using this model. And in conclusion, Glaser's basic teaching model is a psychological based model which proposes to perform the complex process of teaching by passing the 4 stages associated with the 4 basic components of the model, namely instructional objectives, entering behavior, instructional procedures, and performance assessment. It is stripped down teaching model which was in vogue since the 19th century with the onset of the concept of mechanization of teaching. The model puts a greater emphasis on teachers' competence and skills than on personal art of teaching. It is by way the prototype for other model of teaching. Thank you.